Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Heroes on the Horizon here at the rainy IUS campus.
It's cold.
It's cold, it's rainy, it's gross, it's disgusting. Just like our topic for today, possibly, but in a good way instead of a bad way, like the weather, if that makes any sense.
It's a topic of terror.
It's a topic of chilling horror.
It's a topic of illicit words.
It's a topic of sandiness.
It's a topic of dreams.
Dreams. We're talking about Sandman today. Mr. Sandman,
bring me a dream.
Make her the cutest
that I've ever seen.
Yes.
Give her two lips like
roses and clover.
Oh, we need to stop. This is getting bad.
So Sandman. But before
we are sorry to all of our listeners right now for that. That was rough.
I'm not sorry at all.
My apologies.
I'm proud of us. So before we get into that, though, and explain what that is for anyone who doesn't know.
I'm so confused.
Yeah, anybody who doesn't know what Sandman is just ashamed to be listening right now. Follow us on our social media. We have an Instagram. Charlie, would you like to tell us the Instagram?
The Instagram is called heroes_on_the_horizon, and I forgot it existed this week.
So did I. It's finals week, everybody, basically.
Yeah.
So I don't feel bad at all. And our Twitter is @on_heroes.
Which I forgot about, too.
So did I. But it's okay, because we got an awesome topic for you today to make up for it.
We're talking about Sandman and censorship.
And Sandman.
And Sandman.
And censorship.
As much as both of we can.
Because there's a lot to cover today, because there's a lot to talk about with Sandman.
Yeah, we could even read all this stuff by the time we got on here. We tried, but
there's a lot to read. There's so many stories.
Stories.
But it's like it's not like
they ran for 8 years.
It's not like a lot of comic books like Heroes, where the story just kind of goes on and continually resets.
Yeah.
It's more of a narrative, which I find to be really appealing and very exciting, personally.
I agree. Well, for anyone who's wondering, Sandman is a book made by Neil Gaiman. He's a famous author. He wrote Coraline, American Gods, a bunch of really famous dark and edgy novels, but also really good novels.
He's kind of a dark and edgy dude.
And
he even in his biographical little blurb on the back, he says that he just wears all black. And
he does.
And that's a personality trait for him, and I love that.
In the 80s, he looks just like the main character of Dream in the books.
I think that he actually kind of modeled himself, the Dream after himself.
Absolutely. But yeah, it's a book, a series that ran from 1989 to 1996 in DC's Vertigo line. Levi, do you know what Vertigo is? Vertigo is like a separate kind of... It's like almost another comic book company, but not. It's in DC. But it's kind of supposed to be thought of that way. Kind of like Adult Swim was a part of Cartoon Network. That's a great analogy right there.
Yeah.
It's got more adult content and things like that.
Oftentimes it's in the same universe as DC, but not really. It's connected, but barely.
Yeah, they don't really acknowledge that due to censorship reasons, what they can show to younger kids, which we're going to touch on. It's going to be wild.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I mean, in Sandman, there is mention of the Justice League and of Batman and some of the villains. They spend some time in the Arkham Asylum, especially the first one.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is very removed, and there is this concept of superheroes existing within the universe, but it's not the main focus, which is kind of neat. In Sandman, I think they focus more on the supernatural and on almost more philosophical ideas, in a sense a lot of the main characters are personifications of different kinds of experiences that humans have.
Absolutely.
Sandman he goes by many different names. I think his actual name is Dream, but some people call him Morpheus.
Yeah.
So I'm not it's weird because like they'll refer to him as Dream and they'll refer to him as Morpheus in the same sentence.
Yeah. No one really calls him Sandman though.
Yeah, but I thought I read it referred to
probably at least once.
Oh yeah, because in Doll's House, there's the superhero guy who thinks he's a superhero.
Yeah.
That's trapped inside the kid's head.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's Sandman because he gets called Sandman by those two creatures.
Yeah.
And but then he's like, basically he knows that he's fighting what he thinks is the former Sandman. So Sandman, that is a title of his.
That was deep right there. Yeah.
And I know that no one else who's not read Sandman knows what in the world I'm talking about. The stories tend to revolve around weird things like that are hard to explain.
Exactly. Well, a brief introduction character. Might I take the reins here for a second?
Mm-hmm.
So, Sandman, Morpheus, or Dream. He is a member of these beings called the Endless in DC Comics. They are personifications of various aspects of life. So, Dream is personification of all the dreams that humans have, all of our emotion, because he rules a realm, like a different kind of dimension called the dreaming, where all of our dreams, imagination, and thoughts come from. He has control over those, but he's not really, he's not really controlling us. He's more just, I think they mention it somewhere that he's not.
He weaves the story.
He weaves the stories, yes, but he's a servant of man, though. He helps him out because he's making all those dreams and nightmares and things like that because it's necessary.
And all of them are servants of man. In
Absolutely,
a sense.
they're all aspects of that. So he has a sister named Death, who's just the personification of death. She's there when you come into the world, and she walks you out whenever you die. It's really kind of cool. Did you read the Death one?
I read like at the end of the first one. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, I like that. She's probably my favorite. You have Destiny, who has a book and knows about everything that's going to happen. He can't
briefly
mentioned
in the first one.
Yeah, he can't change anything. He just has the book and he knows.
He just. I remember there was a thing about him hesitating to turn the page of his book, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, it's nice. And a few other ones that are kind of lesser important. The big three are Death, Dream, and Destiny, but we have Destruction, who in the
Desire kind of plays a role.
Yeah, Desire plays a role. She has control over people's desires and things like that.
She.
Yeah, she because she has a different. Her personality is just that of Desire. She always wants to be something else. So she'll take a different form, a different gender, a different sex.
Yeah,
it's wild.
And it's kind of cool because the way that he looks is in between. You're not ever sure because it depending upon which panel, it kind of looks more like a girl or kind of more like a guy.
It's cool.
Yeah.
It's very abstract. There's Destruction, who, and at this point in the comic, as Levi's been, he's missing. No one knows where he is.
Which is weird, because a lot of Destruction is happening in the comic.
Yeah, yeah. And then they have other characters who we haven't been introduced yet, me personally, because I haven't made that far in the comic, but yeah.
But, I mean, each comic is kind of... There's a lot. There's a lot to read.
There's a lot.
It's not... It's... Okay, if we were reading like Teen Titans or something, it doesn't take a lot to read through a Teen Titans issue. This is almost like a higher reading level.
Absolutely.
In general.
This is an adult reading content.
Yeah, this is a little bit more deep, but it's still got a lot of the fun that comics have, I would say.
Yeah.
If not even more, even though there's a lot of dark topics and a lot of I would say that it's more vague in a good way. A lot of comics will spoon feed you kind of explanations, and it's really easy to understand. But Sandman kind of plops you in the middle of the world and doesn't explain anything.
You learn as you go.
You learn as you go, which I love. I love that it doesn't underestimate the reader's intelligence. It also means that there's a lot of things that are difficult to necessarily understand right away. For example, Sandman is supposed to be he weaves dreams. He weaves the stories of dreams. And it's kind of implied that there are storylines that he kind of gives that are like almost like standards, like jazz standards, where like he kind of writes them like he was talking to his helper, who I don't know the name of.
Oh, Lucian?
Lucian is with the glasses?
Yeah, it's Cain Abel.
But there was someone else.
What?
There was a third one. He had a hoe.
Oh, shoot.
He was like the gardener of his mansion.
Yeah, I remember that. I can't remember his name right now.
But he was talking to him, and Lucian was like, "What you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I'm making a new nightmare." But like, almost as if he kind of just doles out the nightmare to different people when he wants.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not really explained. But it is kind of shown that some of his creations, like dream creatures, can create their own dream world inside people's heads if they want to.
But he doesn't like that.
He doesn't like it. It's against the rules. So it seems like if you're part of this dream world, you do have kind of a stake in it. It seems like his creations have parts of him that and thus contain some of the power of him. Yeah. It's kind of complicated, but basically anything he creates has some of his power in it.
Yeah, but it's not nearly as powerful as who he is, and they don't really follow his plans because, in that story, they were doing it for their own benefit, I believe. Mm-hmm. And whereas Sandman's doing these things because that's how he works. It's because that's how he made these dreams.
Yeah, they have like their own sentience, and they make their own decisions.
Yeah.
So he has. He's like kind of godlike, but not really. He's only really a god of the dream realm.
Yeah, but yeah. He has. I think that's one we can talk about is that he abides, and all of his brothers and sisters abide by rules that they can't break. And that kind of like that kind of affects this whole story. Because like, there's one example later on. A person dies, and death can't bring him back to life because that's against the rules. But dream can, because he can rewrite the story because he's the master of stories, which is wild.
He even made a deal with Shakespeare. Like they kind of explained Shakespeare in one of the.
Yeah, you haven't gone to the actual deal yet.
No, they haven't explained it. They explain it later.
Yeah.
Oh, is it in this book?
No, it's in the third volume.
Oh.
It's called Midsummer. It's an award-winning comic. Actually, it won all awards. It's called It's basically. So you know how in the first one you go to fairy, you meet all like Titana and all the fairy people.
Do I? Have I been there yet?
Yes, I was in the first volume. When he's going through all the dreaming, like check everything's good, check everything's good.
I think so.
Yes.
Probably.
Yeah. Well, the characters in that volume are all characters in A Midsummer Night's Dream, written by Shakespeare, and that comes into play in the comic called Midsummer Night's Dream.
Oh, so they're saying that like Shakespeare got some of Sandman's stories, or Sandman gave them. Don't tell me. I will read it.
No, it's implied that his stories do come from the dreaming. Everyone's stories come from the dreaming, and I think it touches on in the one you read, the guy who lives forever, who just doesn't want to die.
Yeah,
he talks about how he's talking about how Shakespeare wrote a story, and it's like that's Romeo and Juliet, and they can you believe they gave a happy ending? And Morpheus is like what does he say? He's like, oh, don't worry. All stories come back to their original state at some point in time. That's kind of like him saying, like, the structures of stories really don't change over time. They always end up back right where they were. Because Romeo and Juliet, when it was first written back in like the 1400s, had a happy ending, which is wild. It's really cool. But, yeah.
Oh, I remember him talking about that, but I took it in a different way, and I think it also kind of is referenced kind of unconsciously back to what are the stories called written by like Brothers Grimm, like Red Riding Hood I think was one of those, that they like talk about how the original version of the Red Riding Hood had a horrible was kind of like a horror thing and didn't have a good ending.
Yeah.
And that happens like right after that discussion. So there's a lot of like continuity and themes throughout Sandman that are just, it's just very thoughtful in general. Like for example, there was a reference to a philosophical concept called the best of all possible worlds, which is a theory by Leibniz, I think is how you say his name.
Yeah.
And they reference it without any kind of explanation. It's just kind of there, And I really appreciate that they're, like, I don't think regular, like, comic books, such as, like, Teen Titans or whatever, would do that, because I don't think they expect a lot of their readers to know those types of things. And, I mean, I probably wouldn't have known it either if I hadn't just read about it.
You got a fact check.
What?
So apparently, a cool fact, I'm not correcting you, I promise.
It's okay, continue.
Because it kind of plays in this whole story, like stories come back and change as they go. But the Brothers Grimm didn't originate those stories, and a lot of them didn't originally have gory endings.
Oh, so Brothers Grimm made them gory.
Potentially, or it's kind of over time. But like I said, dreams usually take on their original state. Stories.
Weird.
Why? It's wild. I love it.
Yeah. But see, that's funny because I don't think that Neil Gaiman knew that.
I mean, does it matter, though?
I mean, kinda. Because I think he was trying to
Gilbert
make a point.
really care when he told that story?
I don't know.
It's a good question.
I don't know.
But yeah, so overall, the stories in general cover a very large of philosophical topics and things like that. And it's a really lot more adult content, but with that, it has a lot more adult content, like adult features. It has a lot of gore in it, nudity, sex.
Curse words.
Oh,
no.
So many curse words. They travel to the realm of hell. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, and you get to see, like, this giant, like, basically a field of demons. It's great.
It's a lake of fire. Woo!
and Dream's there, and they want to, like, keep him there forever, but he's just like, yo, what power do you guys have if the people imprisoned here can't dream of going to heaven? And then they just part the ways and let him leave. It's like this field of demons just parts like the Red Sea, and he just walks out.
It really shows him flexing on, like, his power,
Yeah, and I think Lucifer's like, one day I'm going to kill him.
Because Lucifer has his own comic series, actually.
Really?
Yeah, so in the 4th volume, he gets sick of hell, because everyone's like, screw Lucifer, he's the devil. He's like, I'm out of here, I'm going to give you the keys, I'm walking out.
Well, I mean, it is run by
Triumvirate?
Yeah, Triumvirate.
Yeah, but he, like, straight up ditches hell and goes on to become, just be a barkeeper in, like, a club owner in, like, L.A. The story is called Lucifer. It's another probably one of the big cornerstones of Vertigo. It's like Sandman, Lucifer, Swamp Thing, and something else.
Now I really want to read that.
Yeah,
I don't have.
There's a TV show on Fox actually based off it.
I really want to read that.
But it's really cool. It dives into a character piece of a sympathetic Lucifer, which would not fly in certain comic codes. But yeah.
See, I always liked the idea of portraying Lucifer in a sympathetic light, not because I agree with it, but because I just think it's fascinating, because I think that, people want to believe in this idea of pure evil, but usually when people do something, they do it because they think it's the right thing to do, or because they think the ends justify the means and they have some kind of ends that's good. And I don't know. I just think that, like, it's impossible to write any character or to think of any person, no matter what they did, and to just think, oh, they're just pure evil. That's just not the way it works. There's no one who's just pure evil and not insane. If they have any kind of rationalization of anything, they're going to rationalize their actions somehow.
Absolutely, and they touch on that at one point in the comic, I believe. One of the characters ends up in a cereal convention. But it's not for, like, cereal. It's a cover for, like, serial killers.
I know. It's great.
It's kind of hilarious,
both,
but also really dark.
It's both hilarious and dark. That's the part I'm on right now.
Oh, I'm not going to spoil it for you then.
It's
a great ending.
I mean, like, I'm most of the way through it, I think, at this point. I'm right up to the point where the big guy
Gilbert?
starts... No. The one with the weird Mickey Mouse hat
type
thing.
Yeah, Dreamland guy.
Starts pursuing what's-her-face.
Yeah, I don't like that part.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm kind of scared.
Keep reading. It's great. It's pretty great.
But anyway,
has Gilbert run off yet?
He's not there.
Yeah.
But I assumed he ran off, but I'm not sure if he's coming back yet.
Yeah, it's cool. You're gonna like it. I'm not gonna spoil it for you.
Okay.
But yeah. So like I said, it does touch on more adult topics, and as part of the whole vertical run of DC Comics is it has a lot more adult content. People get killed. In the Green Arrow run, Green Arrow killed people straight up, but it's got because they did that, they had to move them out of the Justice League in the main universe because they didn't believe that those two could coexist. In like a more kid-friendly Justice League, we could have the murdering Green Arrow and things like that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things, you see characters cross over, and the whole point they did this was because of the Comics Code Authority, which, you want to go and hop into that?
Sure.
Okay, so after the 1950s, comics started going to more of a horror and romance genre because superheroes were dying off, and it kind of was freaking out parents because people were like, it's polluting the minds of the youth, and people were like having comic burning rallies, things like that. There's a Senate subcommittee thrown together.
Wow.
Yeah, and
I see this. I'm sorry. I see this quote here.
Yeah.
It says, "I think Hitler was a beginner compared to the comic book industry."
Absolutely.
Who said that?
That was psychologist Frederick Wertham. He wrote the big book Seduction of the Innocents about how the children are getting polluted by comics. And on all honesty, he did not hate the comic book industry. He just didn't like the media it was portraying. And also, and to the point that he didn't really hate it, he got asked to head the subcommittee, things like that. He got asked to head a comic book code authority, and he said, no, that's not my job. I don't want to worry about that, because he didn't really care. But he believed that. So, he's a psychologist in Harlem. I learned about this. I researched this guy. And he dealt with a lot of troubled youth. And the one thing he knows is that all the kids were reading comics, and that they were all getting in trouble too. But also at that point, every single kid, like 90% of the children on all Earth, read some form of comic, because that was how it was in the 40s and 50s. Everyone had there was Archie comics, there was DC comics, there's hundreds of publishers, unlike today, and every kid read some kind of comic. But he felt that there was a correlation between the two. Granted, I don't think he did really need a psychological study that would be on levels of today's standards, but that's his belief, and it caught fire.
It's a lot like right now how everyone wants to attribute violence to video games, but every kid plays video games. And really what it is there are kids and adults who are more susceptible mentally to suggestion, and they were already pretty unstable.
You're absolutely right.
These people should probably stay away from, or their parents should be aware of this and keep them away from media that's going to disturb their sensitivities,
Maybe.
But most people can handle it. Most people should be exposed to it, even, I would argue, because they need to learn the difference between fantasy and reality. That's a very important distinction to be able to make, I think. Because then how are you going to be able to handle and understand things like satire and analogy and critically think about what anyone tells you ever? You have to be able to handle these things, but some people can't. And people want to just blame something else. There's a philosopher whose name is Sartre. And
I love Sartre.
And he talks about how we have the freedom to choose things, but a lot of us will attach ourselves to something else and blame that for the choices we make.
Absolutely.
So we'll say,
Gosh, I love Sartre.
I was busy doing this other thing, so I couldn't come to this thing. But in the end, he says, no, you made that choice. You have the freedom, and you're making yourself a slave to this other thing by blaming that. And it's the same thing with by blaming different forms of media for violence or for whatever. In reality, people make choices, and it's their choice. That all along the path. Let's say that it's right, that the person is right and comic books or video games or music or whatever it is did lead to some sort of violence or some sort of reduction of morals. The person is still an intelligent human being who is self-aware, or should be, if they're of right and sound mind, and is making the choice to continue down this path, even though they know that it's affecting them. If they're even right, which I don't even believe that they're right, that would be the case. So, like, it's all about, for these people, I think it's all about allocating blame to something instead of actually trying to fix the problem, which is probably more of a mental health problem or maybe a school system problem or something, who knows. But to blame just media is really lame, in my opinion.
I respect your soapbox. That's pretty good, Levi. We'll reflect on that. A lot to take in right there.
I know. When it comes to censorship, I have very strong opinions.
Absolutely. And as did people in the 1950s during the Comic Code Authority had a big, strong opinion. And in fact, before the Comic Code Authority, a group of comic publishers got together and made kind of like a requirement to, it was called it's like the CCMA, something like that, like a Comic Makers Association of America, CMAA, that's it. And they made their own kind of like requirements, like, hey, you can get this cool star, say it's kid-friendly, if you do these things. But no one followed it, and it tanked. But they then adapted basically the exact same rules for the Comic Code Authority. And it got published in, I think, 1956. And do you want to read the rules? These are the exact rules
that if I read
what
the
people
rules.
cannot publish in their comics in the 1956, I believe.
There's so many. Do we want to take turns?
Sure, you do first one.
Okay. Crimes shall never be presented in such a way as to create sympathy for the criminal, to promote distrust of the forces of law and justice, or to inspire others with a desire to imitate criminals.
Interesting.
Yes. Let's just completely destroy any depth or reality in our characters. It's not like laws can be wrong or people can be forced into horrible positions where they have to commit crimes to survive. No.
If crime is depicted, it shall be a sordid and unpleasant activity.
This should probably be like a part B to the first one.
Sordid, your SAT word for the day. Someone tell us what it means.
I don't know. It's bad, basically. Horrible, like wretched, right?
Yeah. Probably, yeah. Next one.
Policemen, judges, government officials, and respected institutions shall never be presented in such a way as to create disrespect for established authority.
That's like when they joined the Peace Corps.
You know what? During the 1950s, there was a lot of government propaganda, and I feel like this just added to it.
Well, it was made by the Senate subcommittee, so...
Yeah, that's just gross.
Yeah.
That's just propaganda right there. Make sure that we all look good so that the children trust us.
You're right.
Wow.
And they wonder why the 70s happened. Everyone's
like, oh man, America is so great. But no, I mean, America's great in many ways, but everyone who says like that the 50s or whatever were the golden years or something, or no, it was just more creepy, actually.
Yeah. Criminals shall not be presented as to be rendered glamorous or to be occupied a position which creates a desire for emulation.
Again, I think that's more of under the whole crime thing.
They kind of like, keep repeating themselves.
Yeah. It really bothers me because it's just in the same way that there's like separation of church and state, there should also be separation of artists and state, because you have to like allow creativity to make the statements that they want to create and say the things that they want to say.
You're right.
Otherwise, you're controlling freedom of speech.
Can I do the next one? I like this? It's my favorite.
Okay.
In every instance, good shall triumph over evil, and the criminal punished for his misdeeds. Which, you can argue they have fought with that. they're pretty loose with that because like in the Death of the Family, so Jason Todd got killed and then Joker won in that one issue though. But over the whole arc, Batman still won that fight, so they could like easily play around with that.
It's like in Scooby-Doo how they always unmask the villain at the end, and they're always like, "Oh, you darn kids," or however.
I think it went deeper than that though.
I mean, yeah, they probably pushed and pulled at the rules, but they still had to follow them.
You do the next one.
Okay. Scenes of excessive violence shall be prohibited.
Oh my gosh.
Scenes of brutal torture. I don't know what happened there with torture. Excessive and unnecessary knife and gunplay, physical agony, and gory and gruesome crime shall be eliminated.
Interesting.
I mean, if we're operating under the assumption that only children read these, then I can understand why the comic book writers would avoid putting that in there, like, on their own.
Yeah.
That would make sense. But, it's very short-sighted.
Sandman does not follow that.
Oh, no. Sandman has lots of gore. I mean, you have people, like, cutting their own fingers off and beheadings, and it's great.
Ooh, I like this one. No comic magazine shall use the words horror or terror in their titles.
Wow. Why?
That's why the horror genre died in comics.
Why?
Because it promoted demon stuff. Like,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, if you down, you need to get more into next one.
All scenes of horror, excessive bloodshed, gory or gruesome crimes, depravity, lust, sadism, masochism shall not be permitted.
And that's why Wonder Woman's creator got in trouble.
Is it sadism or sadism?
Sadism? Yeah.
I've never actually heard it said aloud.
All lurid, unsavory, gruesome illustrations shall be eliminated.
See, a lot of these could just be like little points underneath and other points.
Yeah.
Inclusion of stories dealing with evil shall be used or shall be published only where the intent is to illustrate a moral issue, and in no case shall evil be presented alluringly, nor so as to injure the sensibilities of the reader.
Ooh, now that was a controversial one.
This is like a safe space for, like, I don't know. It's like the Senate's safe space.
Yeah.
The Senate has created their safe space from the comic book world.
It's like when people, like, get mad that a lot of millennials need safe spaces, but they get mad when they show, like, sex and violence on TV. It's a double standard.
It is totally a double standard.
Yeah. Did you do the last one? It's my turn?
Yeah, it's your turn.
Scenes dealing with instruments associated with the Walking Dead, torture, vampires and vampirism, ghouls, cannibalism, and werewolfism are prohibited. You can't have werewolves, you can't have vampires.
Well, this is a theme that, like, this is clearly, I think, driven by kind of the Christian sentiment that was running through the nation at the time.
However, this did create a funny situation later on, which I'll talk about here in a second.
Like, they were very scared at the time, I think, of the idea of horror and demons and, like, vampires and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Which I think now is kind of just considered to be more of, like, just a funny ha-ha horror concept and not something to be taken seriously like they did back in the time. And they took this seriously from before this time up until the 80s and 90s with the televangelists, and then I think something changed and now no one cares. Yeah. I don't know what happened.
Ooh. Can I tell a quick funny story? Mm-hmm. So there's a major comic writer, especially in the 80s, no, 70s and 80s, called Marv Wolfman. That's his name. Oh. And when they tried to publish his name on one of his earlier comics, they got flagged like, you can't have werewolves in this story. And they were like, it's his name. It was like a big old, like, big fight between, like, I think it was DC and them. So I figured out, like, how can we publish our writer's name when his last name's a Wolfman? They had to, like, make a slight, like, they had to physically label him as, this is Marv Wolfman, the writer. He's not a Wolfman.
Wow. I'm just disappointed.
I love it.
I'm disappointed in these people.
Here next.
Profanity, obscenity, smut, vulgarity, or words or symbols that have acquired undesirable meanings are forbidden. This is
no
also,
bad words, basically.
Yeah, this is also very short-sighted. I don't think they realized at the time that like there's such a thing as curse words being like made after the fact. Like at one point in the past, the N-word, which is, I know, a horrible thing to even talk about and say now, was like a common word. It was used to describe, that was just the word. And it's in all kinds of old writings. And it's like, holy crap, they just used that word. And then you're like, oh wait, that
Levi,
was normal
said the
back
C
then.
word, we're getting banned.
Oh, another one is, people would use the descriptive word back then, ejaculated, like it's just an excited like response to something.
Yeah.
And now it's awkward to read that because the definition has kind of
changed
a
lot.
And I don't think that when they made rules like this back then, like that doesn't hold up over time.
Yeah, because words gain different meanings.
Yeah, so like something that was said back then might be offensive now, and we wouldn't know.
Yeah. Next one.
I think it's your turn.
Nudity in any form is prohibited, as is indecent or undue exposure. It's pretty straightforward.
Sandman breaks those rules.
A lot. A lot. You see his booty, I think, at one point.
What?
I think you see his booty at one point.
Oh, yeah. And it's funny because there's some... in the first one, I don't remember, Dr. D?
Yeah.
Dr. Destiny, formerly known as Dr. Destiny, walks around naked the whole time, and you just see him like scratching his butt just casually. He's just like, "Are you gonna kill me?" Scratch his butt.
Not like that, am I?
I don't know. I just think it's funny. I think
right.
I don't know. He kind of takes it with humor.
Okay. You get through these.
Oh yeah. Suggestive and salacious illustration or suggestive posture is unacceptable.
Females shall be drawn realistically without exaggerations of any physical qualities.
All of the comics break those now.
Yep.
Illicit sex relations are neither to be hinted at nor portrayed. Rape scenes as well as sexual abnormalities are unacceptable.
Okay. Seduction and rape shall never be shown or suggested.
I wonder what they mean by sexual My goodness.
There's a lot they can do, like transvestitism, voyeurism, exhibitionism.
But considering the time,
barterism.
could they even mean just homosexuality in general?
Yes, they could totally mean that.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
But,
sex perversion or any interference to the same is strictly forbidden.
And then the last one is nudity with meretricious purpose.
They're really flexing their SAT words.
And salacious postures shall not be permitted in the advertising of any product. Clothed figures shall never be presented in such a way as to be offensive or contrary to good taste or morals. I hate that. Good taste or morals is such a vague thing.
It's not tasteful nudity right there.
These types of committees love to use vague language so that they can control whatever and make it so that no one can publish whatever they decide that can't be published.
Yeah.
It can either be as strict or as loose as they want it to be, because really what they want is to control the media, and it frustrates me. This is the same problem that the music industry had to deal with in the 80s. There was a group of mothers who were, I think, wives of some senators, and they got together in a team, and they like sued all these record companies, and they were trying to make it so that you had to censor your records of rock music, because they were like, it was all under the guise of think of the children. It's the same thing.
Like this.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. And fortunately, it did not pass. But one thing it did do is it put the parental advisory notice on CDs.
Yeah. One
of the main people who fought against that and testified in Congress over it was Frank Zappa, and there were some long conversations where they specifically like read out some of his lyrics that were very disgusting, because he tried to write intentionally shocking lyrics, and asked him to explain himself. And to listen to those recordings is hilarious, because they're like these super conservative mothers,
a bunch of Karens,
who are like, and what did you mean by stick it right in? And he goes, well, she wanted him to stick it right in. But it's like, it's the exact same thing. There will always be these pushes for censorship. There are similar pushes right now. And it's just important, I think, to remember that in the end, those kinds of things are always going to stifle creativity. I would argue that any kind of censorship is bad, no matter what it is.
Okay.
I don't know. That's my opinion, though. I'm sorry.
I understand that.
That's my soapbox.
I'll just sit here a second. I want to finish up on the histories, okay?
Oh, yeah, totally.
No problem.
I forgot about that.
No, it's all good. It caused a lot of comic book industries to go under. Like, a lot of comics had their bankings on crime comics and horror comics, which they couldn't publish and get that start, because mothers wouldn't buy their comics, buy their comics those kids.
they wouldn't buy the kids.
Here you go, Spider-Man. Here's Timmy. Buy their kids those comics, and so it caused like a big sink in the market, and that's possibly why we only have probably two big publishers nowadays.
Which is almost a monopoly.
Almost, but yeah, it's complicated. Ever since Image came around, it's not really much of a monopoly anymore. But yeah, so I had a lot of squabbles and things like that. And one of the big ones is when I tried to, in the 70s, actually changed they made the outlines less strict in the 70s, because, it started off with Spider-Man issue 96. The government Department of Education and Welfare asked Stan Lee to write a comic about Spider-Man that dealt with drugs. And he was like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. And Spider-Man's buddy Harry Osborn got hooked on heroin, and DC did one too. And they couldn't get the Comp Code Authority on it, because they're like, that's against the rules. And they're like, the government made me write this.
Well, the government's against the government.
The thing is, they didn't get the stamp, but the comic still sold a lot of comics. It was considered a very important comic, and that kind of showed that, at that point, comics could succeed without the stamp, and that, I think, also paved the way for Vertigo,
which is to remind everyone, Vertigo is what Sandman is published under.
Yeah.
So
it gave us a lot more freedom in the comics, I think, after that, because so Vertigo was published to write those dark comic stuff without the seal, but still publish them under one genre and still have those more intrinsic stories. And that's how those came around.
I think it's funny, though, that the interests of the government came in conflict with the interests of the government.
Right.
That's and
I think at that point, though, the Comp Code Authority was privatized under a certain industry.
Yeah, but I mean, if it all followed it's almost like, the government's propaganda got in the way of the government's propaganda. I'm kind of considering the whole drugs thing to be just the government trying to send a message out to children again.
Don't do drugs.
Don't do drugs.
Which it kind of falls on it's not portraying drugs in a positive light. It's just showing drugs, but they couldn't see past that, I guess. I don't know. It was dumb. But yeah. At that point, comics started getting more lenient. We got Werewolf comic skin, we got Vampire comic skin, we got Ultimate Comics, we got Vertigo, things like that. It started lining up. And by 2001, Marvel left the Comic Book Authority to just publish under their own rating system, like E for everyone, T for teen, A for adult, itchy.
Yeah.
And DC, and by 2011, there's only two people part of it. It was DC Comics and Archie Comics. So DC left first, and then Archie left 1 week later, and then it was kaput. However, by 2011, DC was the only comic company actually sending their comics to get approval. Otherwise, Archie just got all the stamps anyway, because they're like, it's Archie, we're not going to.
Yeah.
But DC's the only one to set it. By that point, they had not, the actual industry that was supposed to be reviewing the comics had not read a single DC comic since 2009. They were just putting the stamps on there, except for one woman who read every single comic since them, named Holly Montekernig. This one old lady in her house read all the DC comics and was like, this gets a stamp.
Wow.
And that's the end of my rant on the Comic Code Authority.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get in the middle of a soapbox in the middle of the history of the Comic Book Authority.
I'm sorry about that.
No,
I should have been more fluid.
I am like, if you guys can't tell, I have a very strong opinion on this.
He does.
And I believe that history is on my side. And
yes.
When we finally broke out of the Comic Book Authority, we got amazing stories like Sandman. But I think that a lot of the Comic Book Authority is partially to blame for why a lot of comics are very formulaic right now.
Hellblazer. Sorry. That's the fourth pillar of Vertigo. Sorry. You're good.
What's it called?
None. Hellblazer.
Okay. Because... what was I saying? Darn it.
Sorry.
No.
History's on your side.
Because we've got all these great stories right now, but I feel like comics would probably be actually in a more creatively healthy place if it weren't for the Comics Code Authority. In fact, they might be even more popular now if history had gone a different direction. Because I feel like limiting the topics actually like limited the audience, and it kind of set the precedence that comics were for kids early on.
Counterpoint. So a lot of industries started dropping off the Authority around the 90s and stuff.
Yeah.
And at that point, the comic book crash happened. So whenever the comic books were booming, the Comic Code Authority was still in place. But now that it's not really there, the industry is kind of struggling, though. Could be a correlation or just or a coincidence.
I'm not sure, because I feel like the problem is that they set this precedence for so long that comic books are for kids, that when they finally broke out of it after so long, like since the 30s, that it was like a shock to the system because it had been one way for so long, and so then kids weren't getting them. But then again, also keep in mind that by the time that they dropped off, there were other mediums of media that kids could watch and pay attention to. Like you had TV, you had movies, you had all this stuff like that was more easily accessible, and the internet, for goodness sakes, was starting to be a thing. So I can see why the crash would happen regardless. Yeah. It might have happened regardless.
I will say, I think it's a lot harder, though, for parents to buy kids for the comics, because it's hard for them to tell what they should buy them, because they have to, like, look through. Like, I was at the comic book shop about maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, and a guy came in who brought his son and his daughter with him, and they're like, "Can I read this?" He's like, "Let me look." Look through it, like, "Oh, probably not. It's got some nudity in there." Because he can't, because, like, the rating system is there on most like comics, but, like, they're pretty lenient with what they have there, with, like, what's cool for teens, what's cool for kids. And a lot of the kids' comics that they have just aren't really, good. Like, it's just TV episodes, panels with just word bubbles on them.
Yeah.
I feel like with the loss of the comic books, we possibly could have lost more of a market for children, which was comics was built on, I think. I feel like now that all industries are trying to be more adult, it's harder for kids to, like, say, get into it. Because, like I said, am I making sense here?
No, you are.
Okay.
It makes a lot of sense. I think that it would do comics well to take the ratings more seriously and make it clearer so that, it's easier to tell what's okay to read and what isn't for kids. Because, I mean, if I was a parent, I would be concerned about that. Like, I don't want my 7-year-old reading a comic that's like Sandman at all. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be bad.
Yeah. Also, now that they have the Authority gone, so the Vertigo comics have recently come into the whole DC mainstream, which I don't know how I feel about, because the DC comics are more geared towards a younger audience, I guess, but also has a lot more violent content. So it's kind of like, a mix of emotions. Like, yeah, Hellblazer is there. So, because Hellblazer was a Vertigo property. He dealt with, outsmarting demons and things like that. He was a chain smoker and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But now that he's in more DC Comics, it's not really Hellblazer. He's not really the exact same person. Like, they still trying to touch on things, but
they try and water him down.
Yeah, I think that they water him down. Because in Justice League Dark, they made more of instead of the guy who outsmarts the demons, just more he's a powerful magician. And it's just it just doesn't really feel the same, I think. Of course, people will disagree with me, but I mean that's their opinion. They're allowed to disagree with me. I respect that. I can see where they're coming from.
I just think that in general, what would help with this is more diversity, not like in the sense of, not in the modern sense, but more diversity in storytelling, and more diversity in all the different like smaller comic book publishers.
Yeah.
Because I mean, in the end, really, it's still only DC and Marvel, and there are some other ones now, but they're way smaller and not as much in the public consciousness. It would be great for, I think, comic books in general, if some of these other comic book publishers were like more up there, and there were. I feel like writers. I feel like with DC and Marvel, there's like a tone.
Yeah.
That isn't necessarily shared amongst the other publishers. And when you publish under DC or Marvel, your comic book's going to end up being a DC or Marvel comic book.
Yeah.
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but if you want to have a large diversity of different stories to tell, unique stories that are completely different from any other thing, you're probably going to end up not publishing on DC or Marvel. But they're the ones that have most of the power, I'd say, overall.
Yeah.
Especially in the public consciousness. I know when you get into the culture, you're gonna be exposed to other ideas more, but that and other publishers more.
That's awful.
Yeah. But like, I don't know. It seems to me like part of that is just kind of the fact that it's a DC property. And DC kind of does that to things.
Yeah, I understand that.
They have like a way, and Marvel has a way.
Yes.
I mean, it seems like even Vertigo has a way.
Yeah, naturally, they have their own bread and butter. But now that, because they had to have that own bread and butter, because they had to for the sakes of ratings and things like that. They had to keep them kind of separate.
Yeah.
Which has kind of like kind of gone away. I feel like. In my opinion, I think censorship in a way creates more creative comics because you can have like you technically have two different worlds. So Vertigo can handle the dark and edgy stuff that's great for adults, and ordinary DC has some things that's like it's entertaining for kids, but also it touches on terms. I feel like a great example of this is the DC animated universe. It's like television series. It's like Justice League, Batman the animated series, Superman the animated series.
Mm-hmm.
It was all made by Bruce Timm. He's a great animator. I love him. What time we got? Okay. And they couldn't talk about the dark and violent subjects. They had to allude to it. Like they can't mention Hawkman and Hawkgirl and Green Lantern are totally smashing. They had a hint at it, and it was kind of clever because you're kind of dancing around the subject, but it was still a reference, but it's still a way that kids wouldn't fully understand it. I liked that. It was creative. But once they kind of after 2011, they got rid of it. And they had they hinted that Bruce, Batman, and Batgirl had a relationship, but after the comic course already crashed, in their movie The Killing Joke, it straight up showed Batman, Batgirl getting it on a rooftop, and people were like, I don't really like that. Yeah. I feel like I enjoy subtly because I feel like it leaves more imagination to the person who's reading the comic. I think, or in general.
And I think it makes more sense to separate them. I think it was a mistake to not keep Vertigo separate from DC. But I don't know if that's censorship's fault. I feel like that was just a poor decision that they made because of the censorship. They I don't know. You in general, I think it's better to allow everything its lane, and not necessarily for everything to stay in their lane, but allow them to have a lane. And when you eliminate lanes, everyone kind of has to drive on the same lane.
You get a state street right now.
You get one lane, and that's it.
It's all backed up, and people drive through red lights, and they block you off so you can't get to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry.
So, I don't know. Basically, censorship is horrible, but can be good because
asterisk
can be good. Okay, that reminds me. I know we're running out of time.
You're fine.
Something that does help creativity is limitation. When you're limited, people tend to be more creative as to what they can do, which kind of serves the analogy of the lanes thing, and it kind of pushes your point. But I think at one point, wasn't things like Vertigo not even allowed at all under the censorship rules?
No, it couldn't, because they would not have them. If you look in those comics in there, any of them, they don't have the Comic Code Authority.
Yeah.
At all. And that was 89, so they're still pretty late at that point. But like,
yeah.
No, they did not compromise on their rules. If you went against their context, their rules, they went upon, which they got lenient later on. But still, if you didn't have what they were meant for, you wouldn't get the authority. Now, I can't remember if Tomb of Dracula and Werewolf by Night had stickers on them. I can't remember. It might have, but I feel like those comics that did do those things did not come until later on in the authority when it got weaker. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah. I think that, like, I don't know. It seems like Sandman wouldn't have been able to happen.
No.
Like, so censorship, yeah,
if Vertigo did not exist, Sandman could not.
It's like another form of limiting the lanes you can use.
Yeah.
So it seems like too much of one thing is bad.
Yeah. Well,
anyway, we're basically out of time.
Sorry, guys. We could talk about this all day.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about. Appreciate you all tuning in.
Thank you.
Again, follow us on our Instagram. Charlie, could you please?
Heroes_on_horizon.
I always botch up that.
And our Twitter
at @on_heroes.
Nice.
And I can remember that one.
Thanks, guys.
We hope you enjoyed this episode.
If
you have any comments about what we have discussed today, or any suggestions or anything, please let us know on Twitter.